Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
After 2 decades of marriage, I found out my wife had been unfaithful. I walked away without a second thought, leaving everything behind to start fresh. It's something you never imagine will happen to you. You hear stories about friends going through divorces for all kinds of reasons, but because you trust and love your spouse, you think you're different. You believe you won't be just another statistic, another failed marriage. But as I look at divorce rates now, I can't help but wonder why anyone gets married at all. Maybe I should have recognized the warning signs. Looking back, and after reading countless articles and stories, I see how love can cloud your judgment. When you're in love, everything feels softer, and the red flags become easier to ignore. Marriage comes with dreams, children, a home, a shared future. The thought of growing old together is comforting. But those signs were always there, even if I refused to see them. I grew up in a family that eventually split into a single-parent household. For most of my childhood, my parents' marriage seemed unbreakable. They appeared to love and respect each other. My father worked tirelessly, physically draining himself, but he did it all for us. He was devoted. My mother returned to work when my younger sister started school, but she was always there for us too. As kids, we were unaware of the cracks forming. But later, it all made sense. The affair didn't start immediately. I was a teenager when it began. My brother was about 18 months younger than me, and my sister was 3 years younger. It started the way these things often do: late nights at work, out-of-town business trips, immediate showers after coming home from suspicious outings, and dressing far better than she ever had for my father. Back then, there were no smartphones, so she'd sneak phone calls and disappear at strange hours for so-called meetings. My father only discovered the affair when he came home early one day, hoping to surprise her. She had told him she was taking the afternoon off to get her hair done and go shopping. Instead, he found her car and another car he recognized in the driveway. He parked down the street, entered through the back door, and walked into their bedroom. There, he found her with her boss James Thornton in their marital bed. My father lost his temper and attacked him. James crawled out of our house, bruised and beaten. But my father soon realized that, in a world where no-fault divorce had become the norm, infidelity carried little legal weight. People say possession is 9/10 of the law, and it felt true. He tried to throw her out, packed her things, and sent her to my grandparents, but they wanted nothing to do with her after learning the truth. Her own sister refused to take her in. The house was co-owned, and she refused to leave. My father was trapped. Under the law, they had to live apart for 12 months before divorce could be filed. Before finalizing the divorce, my father made several attempts to evict my mother due to her infidelity. But adultery wasn't considered a crime, and she had every legal right to stay in the house. No-fault divorce laws can feel particularly unfair in cases like this, where one partner breaks their vows, but faces no real consequences. Eventually, my father gave up on trying to stay under the same roof with the woman who had betrayed him. He moved out and found an apartment. Unfortunately, it wasn't large enough to accommodate all 3 of us kids, so we stayed with our mother. I quickly figured out what was really going on and didn't hesitate to tell her exactly how I felt. She tried to justify her actions, but I told her outright that I would live with my father the first chance I got. My younger brother and sister weren't told the truth, so they were left confused about why our father had suddenly left. I tried to explain as best I could without diving into all the details. The only decent thing my mother did that year was continue allowing us to visit our father. During those early months, he was heartbroken. He did his best to stay strong for us, especially my siblings. But as the oldest, I could tell his smiles were forced. One night, after they had gone to bed, he sat me down and admitted that we, his children, were the only reason he kept going. He promised to fight for custody and a place we could all live together. But back then, it was rare for fathers to win custody. After the required 12-month separation, the divorce went to court. When I was finally old enough to express my wishes legally, I made it clear I wanted to live with my father. Unfortunately, my brother and sister were considered too young to decide, and despite their words, custody of all 3 of us was awarded to our mother. One small consolation for my father was that, unlike in the US, Australia doesn't award alimony. While spousal maintenance exists, it's rarely granted, especially since our mother was already employed. He only had to pay a fair amount of child support, which in Australia is more reasonable than in many other countries. It didn't leave him financially ruined. The next 4 years were tough. I resented my mother deeply, and she knew it. Anytime she introduced a new man, I made sure he knew she had cheated and broken up our family. I brought her to tears more than once. By the time I turned 16, we barely spoke. I spent most of my time away from home at school, work, or anywhere else I could be. After the divorce, my father slowly rebuilt his life. Eventually, he met a kind woman named Natalie, who was also divorced. I supported their relationship from the beginning, and over time, she came to love us as her own. She had children too, and we embraced them as siblings. Despite all the pain, I was comforted knowing my father had found love again. Even though I knew my father was hesitant about marrying again, Natalie seemed to understand his fears and happily agreed to live together instead. They eventually rented a place and began a de facto relationship. As soon as I turned 18 and graduated from high school, I moved out of my mother's house. The only reason I had stayed that long was for my younger siblings, whom I hated to leave behind. By that point, my relationship with my mother had completely deteriorated. The final words I said to her were, I'll admit, harsh, but they were the result of years of bottled-up anger and pain. I had watched my father be forced out of his own home simply because he refused to remain married to someone who had betrayed him. Despite everything, my mother cried as I packed up my car. I hugged my brother and sister before I left, assuring them I would always be there for them, that I would never abandon them. Then I took one last look at my mother and drove away. That experience left me wary of women. I had read a lot about infidelity and knew deep down I was someone who valued monogamy. I wanted a partner who felt the same. I had a few girlfriends in high school, but once I started working and earning money, I began dating more seriously, hoping to find someone I could truly trust and love. I met Kayla when I was 21. She had just finished university, and I was working as an engineer while also attending night classes. I enjoyed working with my hands, but hoped to eventually move up into a managerial role. We met at a corporate event. She was working part-time as a sales rep for a supply company that collaborated with the firm I was representing. We clicked instantly. By the end of the day, I had her number saved in my phone and told her I'd be in touch. Marvin, going on a hot date? My roommate asked. He was one of my closest friends from high school, and we were living together to split the rent. Something like that, I replied. Is this the girl from the conference? Yeah, I said, smirking. Back off, Dave. I just waited a few days so I wouldn't seem too eager. I finally called her, and to my relief, she sounded excited, eager to meet up again. After throwing on some aftershave and giving myself a final look in the mirror, I realized I actually looked pretty decent, not like a bum for once. My job was respectable, even if the pay wasn't amazing, and I was living comfortably. We agreed to meet at a bar in town. I prefer to keep first dates simple, no fancy dinners. I'd heard too many stories of guys being used for free meals, never to hear from the woman again. When I walked in, she was already there, perched on a stool with a drink in hand. Our eyes met across the room. She smiled, and my heart instantly picked up pace. As the evening went on and the drinks flowed, we started opening up to each other. She admitted her role at the company was only temporary. She'd been hired mostly because her looks helped draw in customers. She laughed, admitting it was true, but said it made her feel like a piece of meat. So many married men came after me, she said. It was disgusting. I understood where she was coming from. Sure, my own mother had cheated, but from everything I'd read and observed, both men and women were equally guilty when it came to infidelity. Out of curiosity, I looked up some statistics online and was shocked by how many people, both men and women, openly admitted to having extramarital affairs. To make matters worse, several Australian articles painted our nation as full of unfaithful partners. You were the perfect gentleman, Marvin, she told me, taking my hand in hers. You kept eye contact the whole time and were completely professional, at least until you asked for my number. I placed one hand over my heart and raised the other. I swear I'm single. Ask any of my friends. She smiled and grabbed my hand again. Good. I get a really good feeling about you. I've already been hurt before. We agreed to take things slow. For the next few weeks, we met for coffee or cocktails, keeping it casual. By the third date, we shared our first kiss. She already knew about what had happened between my parents, and when she hugged me tightly that night, I felt something inside me ease. When we kissed, I knew it was right. And when I looked into her eyes, I saw she felt the same. A week later, drinks turned into dinner, and she came back to the apartment I shared with Dave. Fortunately, he was rarely home, as he spent most of his time at his girlfriend's place. After one last drink, I took her hand, and we made love for the first time. A month later, she told me she loved me. I said it back, and things just grew from there. When she landed a stable job, we started talking about the future, moving in together, buying a house, marriage, and having children. Even though the memory of what had happened to my father lingered in my mind, Kayla had already won my heart. That was what mattered. She was warm, kind, and easy to be around. She often said her biggest dreams were to be a wife and a mother. Before getting married, we decided to buy a house together. Luckily, this was just before the housing boom that swept across Australia, especially Sydney. But due to her unstable employment history and poor credit, which she was upfront about, she couldn't co-sign the mortgage. I couldn't afford the loan alone, and the banks wouldn't approve it. My father suggested becoming a co-borrower, using his income to support my application. I had no idea how much that would help in the long run. Kayla was so grateful that she nearly cried when he told her she was like another daughter to him. Her parents adored me as well, and just 3 months after moving into the house, I proposed. Everyone was overjoyed when we announced our engagement and set a wedding date. Up to that point, marrying Kayla was the happiest day of my life. I truly believed I had found my soulmate, and she often said the same. As I walked down the aisle toward her, I couldn't stop grinning. She started giggling when I took her hand, and we were both filled with joy that we had finally made our commitment official. This wasn't a church wedding, we chose a park instead, setting up a marquee nearby for the reception. Our honeymoon was a week-long getaway to a Pacific island filled with sun, sea, and sand. Unsurprisingly, that was when Kayla became pregnant with our first child. 9 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and then our son arrived. 3 months later, we both agreed our family was complete. Surprisingly, Kayla didn't want me to have a vasectomy in case we changed our minds in the future. She didn't want her tubes tied either. Instead, she went back on birth control, saying it had never caused her issues before. Life carried on. She stayed home as a full-time mother until both kids started school. Once our son began attending, she returned to part-time work, sticking to school hours. It wasn't until both children were in middle school that she resumed working full-time. By the time we were 45, I had advanced to regional manager for a national engineering network. I traveled often, but was rarely away overnight. Kayla had built a successful career in real estate and managed her own office, with only occasional trips to the main headquarters in the city. Our daughter Charlene eventually moved in with her boyfriend, a respectable young man who seemed deeply committed to her. I figured a wedding was just around the corner. Our son Stanley was still at university, living near campus. He had a variety of interests, and while not all of them were conventional, Kayla and I supported him wholeheartedly. We had been married for over 2 decades. I believed we were still in love, just as we were on our wedding day. I remained devoted to her, loyal in thought and action. I might have noticed other women, but I never acted on it. My heart belonged to Kayla. I couldn't betray her. Still, I couldn't shake the memories of what had happened to my father. I should have recognized the warning signs. I thought I was being cautious, preparing myself mentally for something I hoped would never come. You never think it's going to happen to you, do you? I said to Dave. You think Kayla's cheating on you? His voice was laced with disbelief. Mate, she absolutely adores you. I thought so too, I replied. But now that Stanley's moved out, I expected things to go back to how they were. Instead, she's acting just like my mother did with my dad. Even thinking about it made my blood boil. I hadn't seen my mother in over 20 years. She'd come to my wedding only because my father insisted. By then, he was married to Natalie and long retired. He encouraged me to be the bigger person and invite her. I didn't want to, but I knew not doing so would reflect badly on me. So I clenched my jaw and mailed the invitation. Since then, our only communication had been occasional emails about the grandchildren she barely made time to see. Beyond that, I had no contact with her. So what's your plan? Gather as much evidence as I can. If she's cheating, I'll leave no drama, just walk away. And how exactly are you going to pull that off? I have my ways. She's gotten more careful lately. I should have noticed the signs earlier. This is what I get for trusting her. By the time I truly saw what was happening, it was already too late to stop it. So now, I'm just preparing for the inevitable. That Monday morning, I scheduled a meeting with a private investigator. I didn't need photos or video, just something solid that could help my case. Unfortunately, adultery isn't legal grounds for divorce in this country. That's true, I admitted. But a man can still protect himself if he's smart and fast. Luckily, she waited until the kids were out of the house to start messing around. And in her arrogance, she forgot a few important legal details that could work in my favor. He patted me on the shoulder. I'm sorry, mate. I really am. I took a long sip of my beer. The hardest part is, I still love her. Maybe I'm paranoid. Maybe I'm just a jealous fool. But the signs are there. I ignored them too long. The next morning, I drove to my father's place. Natalie greeted me with her usual warmth and asked if I wanted her to sit with us. I must have looked worse than I thought, because even though it was only 10 a.m., my dad handed me a cold beer and told me to take my time. I managed to smile as he held Natalie's hand. They were still just as in love as they'd been on their wedding day. The last one didn't last long, he said. No, but he really wanted her to be his wife. I think Kayla's cheating, I said. Natalie let out a long sigh. My dad mumbled, not again. I'm hiring a private investigator on Monday, but the signs are all there exactly like the ones you warned me about when it came to Mom. If Kayla's cheating, she's probably read a whole book on how to hide it. But I'm done being blind. So what do you want from me? He asked. I smiled. Natalie chuckled, probably because it wasn't a warm smile. Dad, I'm going to give you the house. Remember when you co-signed the mortgage years ago? Kayla never signed it. Legally, you and I own it, not her. Once I'm out, she'll be nothing more than a tenant. I'm gifting the house to you. Legally, I can do that at no cost under state and federal law. And after the divorce? He asked. Once it's over, I'll sign a month-to-month lease with you. That way, you'll handle things with Kayla. Sure, she has some tenant rights because she's lived there so long, but if it comes to it, we'll get a court order to remove her. Unfortunately, I won't be sticking around to handle that part myself. Marvin, have you really thought this through? Natalie asked gently. Kayla and I had conversations about fidelity before we ever got married. She knows about my mother. She knows what that betrayal did to me. I told her plainly. If she ever cheated on me, I would never forgive her. I don't care if it happens once or 100 times. If you sleep with someone else, you've broken the promise we made. That's a violation of our prenup. With these no-fault divorce laws, at least I can walk away without owing her a cent. No spousal support either, since she earns just as much as I do. Thankfully, we don't have those dreaded alimony laws like some other states. I'm not giving a cheating woman a dime of my money just because she couldn't stay faithful. I took a sip of beer and glanced at Natalie. Sorry, I'm just worked up about this. I really hope I'm wrong. That night, Kayla came home and curled up on the couch to watch a movie. She smiled at me as always, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. Where have you been? She asked. I met with my dad. Just needed some advice, I replied. About what? A new job? There might be an opportunity coming up. The truth was, I didn't have any real proof, just suspicions. If she was cheating, it wasn't with someone she saw every day. I knew that if unexpected girls' nights started happening, that would be a serious red flag, but so far, nothing like that had come up. She used to stay late at work now and then, but I was getting fed up with that. And if I worked late, she'd immediately get suspicious of me. That night, before we went to bed, she cuddled up to me like always and whispered that she loved me. It hurt to think she might be lying. Maybe she did love me, but something inside her wanted more or someone else. If that was the case, we'd split. She could go find whoever she was really looking for. I've read fiction about women who change, who cross lines they never thought they would. The idea of Kayla doing anything like that nearly made me sick. But until I had proof, I had to trust her. Trust, but verify. That's what they say. So when I whispered back, I love you, I meant it. But the possibility of betrayal gnawed at me. The next day was Monday. I went to work first, like always. We had breakfast together, and then I brushed my teeth. Everything about that morning felt normal. Her eyes sparkled when she said she loved me and wished me a great day. I almost felt guilty knowing I had a meeting at lunch with a private investigator to set up surveillance on my wife. After 20 years of what I thought was a happy marriage, this is where we were. When the investigator showed up, I was surprised it was a woman in a trench coat and fedora, like something out of an old detective movie. I know I look like I walked off a film set, she said with a smirk, catching my reaction. She explained the process, the services, and the costs. Then she asked about our finances. We have separate accounts, I told her, but a joint account for bills and household expenses. Why do you think she's cheating? I told her about what I saw my mother do, what my father discovered, and how it mirrored what was happening now. She listened carefully, then asked, how's your sex life? It was fine after our son moved out, I replied, but about 6 months ago, it started to decline again. I figured we were both just pushing the issue to the back of our minds. Honestly, I wish I could be intimate with my wife every night. Just because I'm 45 doesn't mean I've lost interest. Have you noticed any changes in her behavior? She asked. Yes, I replied. They're subtle, but they're there. You know the phrase red flags? She nodded, and I smiled faintly. Not enough for a full-on communist parade, but definitely enough to make me uneasy. She laid out their services, everything from phone tapping and surveillance footage to identity tracking and other more advanced methods. She was honest. Some of these techniques might not hold up in court and could tread into illegal territory. I explained that this wasn't meant to be a long-term arrangement. The truth was, unless I was completely in denial, I had no idea if she was seeing someone during lunch breaks, while working late, or if she was just slipping away now and then for something different. I had to admit I didn't know, and I wanted to. She gave me a few days to think it over, telling me I could call on Friday to begin surveillance the following week. It was hard to let go of intimacy with my wife. I didn't have any concrete answers yet, but the thought of her being with another man or men made me feel sick. I could have lied and claimed I wasn't feeling well, but instead, I told her the truth. I just wasn't in the mood. I know she was hurt when I turned her down. Eventually, she asked if I was stressed at work. I was distracted, so I guess that answer satisfied her. As usual, she snuggled close and whispered, I love you. By Wednesday, I couldn't wait any longer. I called the investigator and asked them to begin right away. I had to know the suspicion was eating me alive. I kept wondering if it was all in my head. It's no wonder so many betrayed spouses end up psychologically broken. In the end, despite the cost, they found the evidence. It only took a month of watching and waiting before her betrayal came to light. By then, I had been reading daily accounts of infidelity, patterns of cheating spouses, how they deceive their partners, and what legal options are available after a marriage falls apart. I had already started packing. I had an evacuation bag ready in the car, and the moving crew knew I was preparing to leave. I just had to give them a date. The house was now legally owned by my father. The lease said nothing about Kayla. With any luck, she'd be evicted in a few months. It was Friday night. I got home at my usual time. Normally, Kayla would be in the living room with a glass of wine, watching TV. We'd order food, talk about our week, maybe make weekend plans, snuggle, and eventually head to bed. Before all of this, our Friday nights were great, especially after the kids had moved out. We'd make love all weekend, sometimes barely leaving the bedroom until Sunday. But that night, I heard her in the bathroom. I nearly laughed to myself. It was such a cliché. I grabbed a beer from the kitchen and settled onto the couch. I never thought it would happen to me, I thought, as I waited in the dim light for her to appear. I expected a seductive little black dress, but instead, she walked in wearing a mismatched blouse, a short skirt, stockings, and heels. She had done her hair, applied makeup, and adorned herself with jewelry to accentuate her beauty. She looked stunning, unfortunately, not for me. At first, I didn't fully grasp what was happening. "Marvin, I didn't realize you were home," she said, clearly startled. I replied, "I got home at my usual time." "Kayla," I continued, "you've clearly been busy preparing for whatever you're up to. Where are you going?" She took a deep breath before answering, "I'm going on a date tonight, Marvin. With John from work." "It's just for work." Her response was a blatant lie. I knew exactly who John was. He was her affair partner. He worked at her company's headquarters, was married, and had kids around the same age as ours. I wasn't sure what she expected me to say, but there comes a time when a man simply has to walk away. If she thought I would beg or plead, she clearly didn't know me at all. She knew my stance on monogamy, infidelity, and standing my ground. I stared at her for a long moment as I approached. She met my gaze, but when I held it, she recoiled. I smiled slightly, then turned to head into the kitchen. "Aren't you going to say anything, Marvin?" "No," I replied simply. She clearly didn't understand how ready I was to end it. We had both been playing our parts well. The difference now was that I wasn't going to destroy her heart with lies. "Okay, fair enough," she said, her voice soft. "I'll be home later. We'll talk then." I didn't respond. I simply followed her to the door. She paused, looking at me one last time, her eyes filled with hesitation. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or something else, but I didn't care anymore. "Good night, Marvin," she said quietly. "Goodbye, Kayla," I replied. She must have thought I was just another man who would tolerate this kind of behavior. But I wasn't. I wasn't going to be a cuckold or put up with nonsense like that. I wasn't interested in an open marriage, wife-swapping, or anything of the sort. It emasculates, demeans, and completely undermines the vows made during marriage. Once she left, I followed through with my plan. I grabbed my evacuation bag and packed another suitcase, then loaded them into the car. Thankful for the convenience of modern technology, I handled everything online. Our debt was minimal, just one credit card, which I paid off and canceled immediately. I covered all the upcoming bills and transferred the majority of our savings from our joint account into my own. I left her enough to cover a couple of months of rent and bills. After that, she would be on her own. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and she didn't own the house. By the time she realized our savings were gone, I would be long gone. As I walked through the house one last time, I couldn't help but think, so many good memories are now ruined. I took another sip of beer and prepared to make 3 calls. The first one should be simple, but the next 2 would be far more difficult. "Dad, it's confirmed. She's cheating on me." She finally found the courage to admit she was going on a date with another man tonight. The plan was now in motion. "Where are you going?" "To Adelaide. I have a new 12-month contract there. Once the divorce is final, I'll probably return to Sydney, but we'll see how things go. It's all up in the air for now." "All right, son. I'll make sure she doesn't find out where you are. A new number, and I'll settle everything once I get there. I'll send you my new address once I've found somewhere to live. Drive carefully and avoid doing anything reckless. Son, all I'm doing is leaving a cheating marriage." Unfortunately, the phrase, like father, like son, carries little weight here. You've done nothing wrong. Just find peace in your decision, and soon you'll be able to move on with your life. Natalie and I both love you. Do my children know? I'll call them next. Good luck, son. Talk to you soon. Making the calls to my children was the hardest thing I've ever done. I called my daughter first, as she'll always be daddy's little girl. When I explained the situation, she cried uncontrollably on the other end of the line. It shattered my heart to hear her sobbing because of the pain in mine. I promised her I would always love her, but for now, I had to leave. I'd send her an email with my new contact details once I was settled, but for the time being, I wasn't telling anyone anything. My son, Stan, took a more stoic approach, as I expected from a young man. He called his mother a derogatory term and asked me what I planned to do with him. "I'll find out where he lives and inform his wife," I replied. "She deserves the truth. Aside from that, I don't want revenge, Stan. This isn't fiction, it's real life. Right now, I'm heartbroken, but all I'm going to do is wait for the divorce and rebuild my life afterward. I'm only 45, maybe 46, when it happens." "What about counseling?" Charlene asked. "Marriage isn't like ours here, and neither are the divorce laws," Stan chimed in. "You've been separated for over 12 months, so you can file for divorce. Since we're both over 18, you won't even have to go to court. Though, you probably will, just to make sure everything goes smoothly. She can't force counseling after 20 years of marriage." "Be careful, Dad," Stan warned. "You know how the courts can be if she's persistent enough." "Then I'll take my evidence to the counselor, put the pictures in front of them, and ask them if they'd stay married to a woman who's been cheating on them." "Okay, Dad. Take care of yourself and stay in touch when you get there. I'll keep you in the loop, as I'm sure Mom will be reaching out to me. She knows the law will protect you." "Thanks, Stan. We'll talk soon." That was it. I wrote Kayla a brief letter explaining that I was leaving and that she would hear from my father soon. I didn't explain why I was leaving that as a surprise. I told her that I had already called our children and told them the truth, just as my father had done for me. She could tell her parents that I left, but if I received any insults or requests for reconciliation, I would send them the proof. Finally, I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the coffee table, along with the note and all the evidence I had gathered. These were copies, as I kept the originals in case I needed them later. Getting into the car, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry, but all the stress I'd been carrying disappeared as soon as I drove away from the house. I booked a hotel on the western outskirts of the city to prepare for my trip to Adelaide. I had 2 weeks to get there and set up my new life, so I took my time and stayed in small country towns along the way, places with nothing more than a pub, a post office, and a police station, often all in one building. A week later, I arrived in Adelaide and was met by several people I recognized from past corporate conferences. I already knew my role, so they took me around the city, showing me potential neighborhoods to live in. I decided to stay in a hotel for a month while I searched for a place. After some research, I chose a modern 3-bedroom apartment in North Adelaide, one of the city's most beautiful suburbs. I wasn't looking to buy, as the prices were high, though not as bad as Sydney. I planned to return to Sydney after 12 months. Once I moved in and settled, I informed my father, siblings, and children about the change in my circumstances. Charlene called immediately, wanting to visit. I missed her terribly, so I arranged for her to fly out for a month. My son was finishing his studies, but with Christmas just 3 months away, he planned to visit then and stay for a few weeks. As for my father, he kept me updated on what was happening with Kayla. "Did you know she didn't come home until the next morning?" he asked. "Yes, I didn't dismiss the private investigators until the following day because I was curious about what she was doing that night. She went to dinner with him, and it was all quite romantic. Then they spent the night at a hotel in the city. There was nothing else I needed to know. I thanked the investigators for their work and paid them, as their services were no longer required. Well, I heard it through the grapevine, and also what she told me. When she got home, she found your wedding ring, the note, and the evidence. She called me, your children, and her family, all in hysterics. You obviously didn't answer your cell phone, and I know she sent you emails. Any calls from her went straight to voicemail, and I marked all her emails as spam. That was just the beginning of her problems. A week later, I showed up at her doorstep with the lease we had signed. Then, I showed her the paperwork proving my father had gifted me the house. Her face turned pale as she realized it was all perfectly legal. I gave her 3 months to find a suitable place to live, and if she didn't leave by then, I would have the police evict her. She's still living there, but I know she wants to move out. Has she asked about me? Of course. She's asked about your family, your children, your friends, even where you work. She's eaten up with guilt for throwing away 20 years of your life together. Has she explained why? Not really. She's sorry, of course, but I heard the same thing from your mother. She was sorry she got caught, not that she cheated on you. Cheaters always live in a fantasy world where they believe they're doing nothing wrong. The usual excuse is that it was just sex. I never cheated on your mother. And believe me, by the time I was in my 30s and 40s, I had plenty of proposals. But I loved her and would never go back on my vows. I got a second chance with Natalie, Marvin. Give yourself time to heal from your marriage. When you're ready, open your heart to someone else. There are millions of good women on this planet. Thank you, Dad. I love you. Love you too, son. Take good care of yourself. Work provided a distraction. I ended up traveling all over South Australia, visiting various stores and suppliers, taking time on weekends to explore the region, particularly the Barossa Valley. I realized that divorce had made me a strong negotiator, unwilling to back down unless it benefited my company. At the very least, my managers were pleased with my performance and were already discussing the possibility of me staying in Adelaide permanently. A month after I moved into the flat, my daughter came to visit. When I was waiting for her at the airport, she yelled, "Daddy," and ran to me. I embraced her tightly and spun her around. She burst into tears as I whispered how much I loved her and promised that once everything was settled, I'd come home for good. She stayed with me for a week, and although I was working, I spent most of the time at home. Whenever I had a free moment, we talked about anything and everything. She told me that her mother had been calling her nonstop, trying to explain her side of the story. I didn't want to give her the proof, but eventually, I gave in and showed her the printed report. By the time she finished reading it, she was in tears and nearly yelled at her mother about how much she hated her. It wasn't my intention to cause that reaction, but despite my promises that her mother still loved her, I had a bad feeling it would take her a long time to forgive her, or maybe she never would. The day she left was devastating for both of us. I knew she wanted to stay just to keep me company. I held her for what felt like hours before she had to leave. I never cried during the months my marriage fell apart. It frustrated me, but it didn't make me upset. But as I watched her drive away, I couldn't help but cry in the car. It made me realize how lonely I was. Yet, her visit had given me a sense of revival. I spoke with her every night, and my son called me at least every few days. My siblings knew what had happened, and my younger sister promised to visit as soon as she could. My father kept me updated on everything going on with Kayla. Even the guys from my old Sydney workplace seemed to be aware of some of the events, though they mostly called just to chat and joke around. It was 6 weeks before Christmas when lightning struck again. I was wandering through the aisles of the nearby supermarket, aimlessly passing the time. Kayla and I used to go grocery shopping together all the time. We'd laugh, joke, and act silly. I reached for a bottle of salad dressing without noticing that another woman was doing the same. Our hands collided, and we both turned to face each other. I think my jaw dropped slightly, and her cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry," I said. "No, it's my fault. I didn't notice you. Please, take the bottle. I can grab something else instead." I'm not sure where my confidence came from, but I surprised myself by saying, "Tell you what, you can take the bottle if you have coffee with me later." I had no idea who she was, what her name was, or anything else. But that brief touch sparked something inside me, and her beauty captivated me. I reached out my hand. "I'm Marvin." She smiled as she took my hand, and I could feel how silky her skin was. "I'm Juliana. Do you often pick up women in supermarkets?" "No, you're the first." "And are you sure I'm not married?" "If you are, I'll revoke my invitation. If not, I hope you'll say yes." She was a brunette with shoulder-length hair, her beautiful blue eyes framed by thin-rimmed black glasses resting on her petite nose. Her lips were full but genuine, and her features were classically beautiful. I had no idea how old she was, but I guess she was around 6 inches shorter than me. I wanted to study her more closely, but I refrained. Judging by her smile, though, it seemed like she liked what she saw. "I'd like to get some coffee. How about you give me your number?" I gave her mine, and she quickly texted me. "I'll finish my shopping in about 30 minutes. Then I'll need to drop this stuff off at home. If you want, I can meet you in a few hours." "Do you live nearby?" "Yes, I do. Same here. I can't stand driving too far for grocery shopping. Tell me where you are, and I'll meet you there." She pushed her cart forward and rested her hand on my arm. "I'll see you soon, Marvin. It's been too long since I had a coffee date." I caught the tone in her voice and met her gaze. I could see the sadness in her eyes, the same kind I saw in my own whenever I looked in the mirror. "I'll text you when I get home to let you know where I'll be." After finishing my shopping, I used the self-checkout and rushed home, unloading everything into the fridge and cupboards. Then, I took a quick bath and changed. Before I left, I texted Juliana to see if she liked the nearby coffee shop I'd grown fond of since moving to the area. She replied a few minutes later, admitting that she often visited the same place and asking if we had seen each other there before. I'll admit, I was a little nervous as I waited for her to arrive. I had dated my wife during our marriage, but this was my first real date in 20 years. She walked in, overdressed, wearing a stunning sundress. We started talking after I bought her a drink. She told me she was truly impressed by my confidence in asking her out in the middle of a busy supermarket. "But Marvin," she said, "I felt something when you touched my hand." "So it wasn't just me?" I asked, surprised. She flushed but nodded. "No, I've read about similar things before, but I thought it was just fantasy." She extended her hand to me, and we both smiled as I closed my palm around hers. "I felt it again," she muttered. I definitely felt it. We didn't delve too deep into our personal histories. It was our first date, after all. I knew her name, that she was single, and that she had once worn a ring on her left hand. She worked as a kindergarten teacher, but didn't have any children of her own. She lived alone in a small apartment, had a few close friends, and her parents lived in a nearby city. She also had a younger sister and was 35 years old. So, 45, Marvin. I don't care how old you are. I only care about the kind of man you are, she said. When she said that, I realized I had finally broken up with my wife. Noticing the hesitant look on her face, I asked if she needed another drink, feeling like an explanation might be in order. But she stopped me before I could say anything further. No, Marvin. For now, I trust you. I can see you're in pain. Is it that obvious? I replied. She smiled softly. He broke your heart, didn't he? I see the same look when I look in the mirror. She squeezed my hand again. It gets easier, but it takes one day at a time. Then weeks and months pass, and the person who hurt you fades away. You'll eventually forget them. She grinned again. And maybe one day, you'll meet someone who helps heal that heart. It just takes time. My father used to say the same thing, I said. Your father is a wise man. We finished our second drink and went outside to walk to her car. I felt uncertain, unsure whether to kiss her, hug her, or simply say goodbye. In the end, we shared a hug, and a part of me didn't want to let go. I couldn't imagine falling in love so quickly again. Neither of us seemed to want to break the embrace. Call me this week, Marvin. I'd love to talk again, she said. What about tonight? I asked, hopeful. She laughed, a playful sound that struck my heart. You're welcome to call me whenever you want. That night, I called her, and every night after that. To avoid interrupting her busy schedule as a teacher, I asked if she'd like to go out to dinner on Friday night. She said yes, and I practically danced around my apartment after hanging up. It had been so long since I felt this excited. At the seminar on Thursday, several people commented on my cheerful demeanor. Since everyone knew about my divorce, they assumed I was seeing someone. I didn't want to jinx anything, so I told them how much I enjoyed my coffee date and that I'd be having dinner with the same person. The next night, I also made it clear that I wasn't interested in going on multiple dates. I preferred to go out with one woman at a time. If it didn't work out, I'd try again with someone else. I had found a restaurant with excellent online reviews, though I'd never been there before. It was a casual dining spot, but the food came highly recommended. Even with the relaxed atmosphere, I chose to wear trousers instead of jeans, a long-sleeved button-down shirt, leather shoes, and cologne. I kept my stubble neatly trimmed. The restaurant had a bar, and I smiled when I saw Juliana waiting for me. She looked a little nervous. As she noticed me walking toward her, she stood up, and without thinking, I leaned in to kiss her. She kissed me back quickly. Wow, she murmured, pulling away. If you're going to greet me like that on our second date, I'd prefer it at the end of our first. A waiter came over and showed us to our seats. Fortunately, the booth was a narrow semicircle, allowing us to sit side by side. After ordering drinks, we started chatting about our weeks. It was impossible not to notice how passionate she was about teaching. When she mentioned wanting to have her own children, I began talking about mine. We both seemed a bit disappointed when the waiter returned to take our order, interrupting the conversation. We decided to share an appetizer and dessert, each having our own main entree. The conversation flowed easily, and I couldn't help but be captivated by her. Her face, her voice, her demeanor, it all fascinated me. She must have noticed me staring because she smiled at me several times. The dinner was wonderful with no complaints. The waiters and servers were polite without being intrusive. After dinner, I paid the bill, but she suggested we head somewhere else. I asked if she wanted another drink, and she agreed. I took her hand and led her to a bar I'd found online. It had a relaxed vibe, with a pianist playing background music. There were more booths, and Juliana had a cocktail while I sipped on a bourbon with a mixer. Marvin, what's wrong? She eventually asked. I told her everything. We shared stories about our lives, our careers, and our children. Then, I told her about my father, the issues with my mother, the divorce, and everything I had learned along the way. I explained how I discovered my wife had been doing the same thing, and how I had left. I'm still married, Juliana, but we're living separately, I confessed. I moved here to make sure the divorce goes through. I'm not sure if what I'm doing counts as cheating. I don't blame you if it does, but my marriage is over. It's just a name at this point. I'll go back to Sydney to finalize everything. And if you meet someone here, I'll talk to him about where things stand between us. I hesitated for a moment, then added, my kids are in Sydney. It's tough being so far from them. I miss them every day. Juliana nodded, and then began to share her own story. My ex-husband was a real piece of work, she said softly. When I was 19, he completely swept me off my feet. He was 25 at the time. The age gap didn't bother me, but my parents warned me about him. I didn't listen because I was in love. I didn't notice the warning signs at first. After a few months, I was shocked when he allowed me to work, but that was the only thing I was permitted to do. He gradually isolated me from my family and friends. My routine became teaching school, and then coming home to be virtually his maid. She paused, and I could feel that there was more to the story. I guess things got worse after that. Him yelling at me meant I was being disrespectful to my spouse. If I dressed nicely or came home late, it meant I was being deceitful. If I spent money on things I wanted, it implied I was irresponsible with finances. He never had a positive thing to say. It was a constant sea of negativity. I can't imagine ever wanting to say anything negative about you, Juliana, I replied quietly. She continued, her voice steady but full of pain. I realized I needed to leave. He was dangerous, and I knew one day he'd either hurt me or completely destroy me. I called my father, crying, begging for help. He came with my uncles and a couple of his friends. My ex tried to fight them off, but pushing or hitting a woman isn't the same as fighting men. My father knocked him out with one punch and tied him to a chair while they helped me move out. I went straight to the police and got a restraining order. I've been divorced for 7 years now, and he has no idea where I am. Juliana met my eyes as she spoke, her vulnerability clear. I haven't dated much, Marvin. I've been scared for so long. She paused. And then I met you, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I nodded, feeling a connection that was undeniable. She got into the car, but it was clear it wasn't safe for her to drive, so I offered to take her home. We stopped in front of an apartment complex, and I realized it had crossed my mind before, even when I had been settling into my own place. When she opened the door, she paused, and I made my decision. I pulled her close and kissed her again. I had a great night, Juliana. I'd love to do it again this week. You can pick any night you want, she replied with a smile. I can cook pretty well. If you want dinner, let me know what night, and I'll bring something. I'm a decent cook too, I said. So, I'll cook first, then you cook for me, and we can compare results. What night? She asked. Wednesday, I replied. Although I expect your usual nightly calls and a bunch of messages. If you play your cards right, you might even get a surprise or two in one of those messages. What are you doing tomorrow? She asked. Nothing. Why not go to the beach? You just want to see me in a bikini, I joked. No, she said with a laugh. I just want to have a good time. When I got home, my phone pinged a few times, but I didn't check it until I was sitting on the couch with a beer in hand. The message from Juliana read, I had an amazing night, Marvin. I wanted to stay with you, but I don't want to rush things. I don't want to rush either, I responded. Bring a change of clothes with you Wednesday night. I hope you'll stay. It's too soon for anything more than just sleeping in the same bed. Marvin, I'm tired of sleeping alone, Juliana texted me. So am I replied. I'm already in bed. It's regal, but it feels empty. It didn't feel that way before I met you. I'll pick you up at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll go for breakfast first, then head to the beach. What's your favorite color? She asked. Mine's usually blue on women, but I also like black and red. I think I have the perfect bikini for you, she added. See you in the morning, Marvin. Sweet dreams, beautiful. Her final message included a heart emoji. The next morning, a honk came from outside her apartment. I knocked on her door and heard her calling me inside. She greeted me with a smile. What do you say? Got a broom to fight off the men? I teased. Her smile grew, and she disappeared briefly, returning in a t-shirt and shorts. She grabbed her bag, and I helped her put it in the car's trunk. We went to a beachside cafe for a modest but satisfying breakfast. By the time we were ready to tan, the beach was already crowded. We spent the day there, dipping into the sea every now and then. Do you want to stay for a drink? I asked. I'd love to, but if I stay, I don't want to leave, she said. Then she told me to go home, change, and come back to have a drink with her, followed by staying the night. I rushed home, packed my suitcase, grabbed the essentials, and hurried to her place. Out of breath, I knocked on the door. She opened it, smiled, grabbed my shirt, pulled me inside, slammed the door shut, and pushed me onto the couch. The next morning, she made me breakfast, and we spent the day lounging in her apartment. The quiet moments felt just as comforting as the conversations we shared. Take your time, Julie. We have all the time in the world, I said, sensing that I was falling deeply for her. I could tell she felt the same, but there was one lingering thought. Was this just a rebound? I had just left my wife of 20 years and found myself falling for the first woman I met. But I wanted to believe that fate had brought us together. There had to be a reason we bumped into each other at that grocery store. We didn't text as much during the day because she was busy, but we stayed in touch every night. The guys at work knew I was seeing someone, so I told my family back in Sydney about her too. My father kept me updated about Kayla, who was apparently about to move out. She was still looking for me, but no one was giving her any information. She thought I was still in Sydney and hoped we'd eventually meet up. Wednesday night couldn't come soon enough. Julie had prepared a delicious lunch, and the dessert she made for us really hit the spot. I patted my stomach and said, It's often said that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. I love you, she said softly. Turning to kiss her, I couldn't help but smile. I love you too, I replied quietly. Isn't it too soon? She asked. No, absolutely not, Julie. If this is how we feel about each other, then so be it. I felt it on our very first date, just sitting together over a cup of coffee. That's when I knew I'd found the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And if being near your kids is important to you, Marvin, I'll come with you. Are you sure? I asked. That's a huge step. There's nothing tying me down here, she said. My parents are healthy, my sister's happily married. I'm not ready to decide right this second, but everything inside me is telling me to go with you. I'd love to meet your children. They'll be here for Christmas. Then you're all coming to celebrate with my family afterward. That night was her first time visiting my apartment. She jokingly called it a bachelor pad, but noted how clean and organized it was. She understood I'd kept things minimal because the space was just temporary. When the topic of marriage came up, she hesitated and looked away, gently holding her wrist. I've been thinking about it too, Julie, I said. And not just because Kayla betrayed me. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I felt this deeply about her, even before everything happened. Maybe it's the excitement of something new. Maybe it's age and perspective. But what I know for sure is that I adore you, Juliana Morris. And someday, I hope you'll become Juliana Williams. She replied in a whisper, I hope so too. For the next 3 weeks, everything was perfect. We didn't spend a single night apart. More often than not, we stayed at her place. It was cozier and more comfortable than mine. She spoke with my father frequently, and I kept my children updated, though they said they wanted to meet her in person before anything else. The week before Christmas, I called my son. I had to ask how his mother was and what she'd been up to. I told her I wouldn't be in Sydney for the holidays, he said. I think she figured out you weren't there anymore. Charlene wants nothing to do with her, won't even talk to her unless absolutely necessary. Ever since that one phone call, she's barely spoken to her. I spoke to your sister last night, he added. She's arriving in a few days. And what about Grandpa and Natalie? I asked. I'll talk to them when I'm back in Sydney. Julie will probably be coming with me. We'll need to find her a job and a house as close as possible so her commute's manageable. Are you sure you don't want to stay here, Dad? He asked. Charlene and I have been talking, and we're thinking of moving closer to you. Your sister's considering it too. Juliana was listening closely and squeezed my hand. Are you absolutely certain, Stan? She asked. You'd be leaving behind friends, family, your whole network. You're more important, he said. And believe me, when Charlene gets here, she'll say the same. Her husband will be all for it too. He couldn't stand living in Sydney. I glanced at Juliana in surprise. I still have to go back to finalize the divorce, Stan. Don't rush into any decisions. I know how it looks, but my choice to leave your mother like this wasn't impulsive. It was something I've thought through for a long time. Beforehand, I was fully aware, Dad. I'm not interested in her anymore. She's still out there trying to convince people she did nothing wrong and that you were to blame for leaving. Juliana came with me to the airport that day. My daughter arrived, accompanied by her husband, Tom. But the moment Charlene spotted me, she dropped her bags and ran straight into my arms. It felt just like the days I'd pick her up from school and she'd light up at the sight of me. She burst into tears, and when I introduced her to Juliana, they both ended up crying. I glanced at Tom and could only shrug helplessly. The next day, my son unexpectedly knocked on my apartment door. Daddy, he exclaimed as we embraced. He held me tightly, and we both wiped our eyes as I led him inside to meet Juliana. He really does resemble you, she commented, and I knew what she meant. I had taken a DNA test a while back, not because I doubted Kayla's early loyalty, but I needed the assurance. Later that morning, I packed all 5 of us into the car and drove to Juliana's parents' house. The trunk was stuffed with gifts, which we brought inside. Her mother took to my daughter instantly, and I could tell my son was immediately welcomed as a grandchild, just as I was embraced like a son. We used a video call service to exchange Christmas greetings with my father. He was joined by my brother, his wife, my sister, her husband, and their children. Kayla, by then, had moved out of our old house and was living with her parents. The most shocking news was about her affair partner. His wife had used evidence to get him fired for serious misconduct and kicked him out. Kayla, meanwhile, was barely hanging on to her job. She'd been demoted and lost several mutual friends who couldn't forgive her betrayal. That day turned out to be incredible. My kids snapped countless photos for their social media, something I'd grown indifferent to over the years. Still, I started getting messages from old friends. Many had reached out to my father, asking for my contact info. Some were just curious about what had happened, so I kept my answers brief. Others filled me in on Kayla's situation, but I brushed it off. None of it mattered. Once the 12-month separation period ended, I'd file for divorce and head back to Sydney to finalize everything. Juliana and her family had a beautiful Christmas. When she brought up the idea of coming to Sydney with me, I gently told her we'd be living in Adelaide instead, and someone from my family would be joining us there. Her face lit up, and when I finally gave her the gift I had carefully chosen, she nearly cried. I wasn't ready to propose just yet, not while I was still technically married, but I gave her a beautiful necklace and bracelet. She put them on immediately and promised to wear them often. After a delicious meal, her father invited me for a drink, and we ended up spending the evening in his garage. In the garage, he had an old sports car on wheels. "I haven't seen Julie this happy in a long time, Marvin," he said. "Part of me thinks leaving Adelaide might be good for her, but would you be content staying here long-term?" "I'll stay for her," I replied. "My kids are planning to relocate to be closer anyway." "How soon can you finalize the divorce?" "Several months at most. I've been honest with Julie from day one. I know she's been hurt before. Possibly up to 6 months." "Huh?" "Yes. I only have solid proof from the final weeks before I made the decision to leave." He shook his head. "I've read about all this cheating garbage. Why get married if you can't stay faithful? Ever heard of cuckolding?" His face said it all he knew, and he clearly hated the idea. Yeah, I nodded. Not sure if Kayla ever intended that, but it's part of the newer nonsense people use to justify cheating and call it open-minded. He scoffed. "If my wife had ever asked me something like that, I'd be in jail. It's beyond disrespectful." He rested a hand on my shoulder. "Julie's ex was a cheater and an abuser. She didn't even know he was cheating, but he slept with anyone who gave him the time of day." His grip on my shoulder tightened. "She loves you, Marvin. Please don't hurt her. I don't think I can take another call like the one she made when she left him." He took a drink, eyes shifting away. "I was a wreck, Marvin. I love her more than anything. She's my little girl." Then he smiled and started calling me son. I'd been through my own pain, and so had she. But together, we were healing. We stayed at her parents' place until late afternoon, and my daughter drove us home since I'd had a few too many drinks. Back at the apartment, the kids had already gone to bed. Juliana tugged me into the bedroom. If the night went well, I knew New Year's Eve would be one to remember. The next day, I took her to a downtown hotel for dinner and drinks. Afterward, we returned to our room where a chilled bottle of champagne and appetizers waited. "Do you have any New Year's wishes?" I asked. "Just one," she replied. "I want you to live here with me." "Deal. I want you to propose as soon as you're divorced." "I'm already looking at rings," I said with a smile. She pulled me closer. "I want to have a baby," she whispered. "We'll get married, Juliana," I said gently. "We'll start a family." A few days later, my kids left. I hated watching them go, but when I mentioned staying in Adelaide and suggested they consider moving too, they promised to explore their options. I called my dad to let him know. He told me to do what was right for me and that he was happy with Natalie. He'd visit whenever he could. The following months were pure happiness. I signed a lease and moved in with Juliana. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was real life. But I couldn't remember ever feeling more content. We built our lives together, every step of the way. She knew my divorce was imminent, and though it sometimes weighed on my mind, we both made a promise to talk openly about any issues and never give each other a reason to feel mistrusted. Life with Juliana was incredible. We were inseparable, and just being near her made me feel like a better version of myself. She inspired me to grow, and in her eyes, everything seemed right. Juliana, in turn, gave me such deep and unwavering love that by the time I was preparing to return to Sydney, I had already purchased an engagement ring. She was more anxious than I was about the trip, knowing that unresolved matters could still arise. At the airport, we were welcomed by my father, siblings, and children. We stayed with my dad while the final steps of the divorce played out. Although I had already filed the necessary paperwork, my lawyer soon informed me that Kayla was trying to contest the divorce. Sitting beside Juliana in my attorney's office, I was stunned to hear she was putting up resistance. "I haven't seen her in a year," I told him. "I followed everything by the book. I can prove I've lived in Adelaide for the past 12 months, and that she hasn't been with me, or even in contact." "That's all true," he replied. "But she still has the legal right to contest. No judge will entertain her objections, and you won't be forced into counseling." "I'm assuming Juliana is your partner?" "Yes. Kayla cheated on me, which was the original reason for the split. But now I have an even stronger reason to end the marriage," I said. "As soon as it's official, I'll propose to Juliana and we'll get married. We plan to have children together," Juliana added. "All right," the lawyer said. "I'll speak with her attorney and find out what she's hoping to accomplish. There's little she can do, but a clever lawyer might try to cause delays." 3 days later, I received word that Kayla had agreed to sign the divorce documents, making it a joint petition on the condition that I spoke with her one last time. I talked it over with Juliana, who supported whatever decision I made. My lawyer also encouraged me to go through with the meeting to finalize everything smoothly. My father chimed in too. "You're with Juliana now, son," he said. "You're building a new life, starting a new family, and your kids will be joining you in Adelaide. Are you still angry with Kayla?" "Not really. I've moved on," I admitted. "I think you're still hurt," he replied. "But if she wants to speak, just let her. Listen, then leave it in the past." "All right. I'll speak with my lawyer and get it scheduled." The following week, we were in court. My lawyer explained that once the meeting took place and Kayla signed the paperwork, the judge would grant the divorce. 1 month and 1 day after the decree, I'd be legally free. I hadn't laid eyes on Kayla since the night she left to meet the man she cheated with. She was already seated when Juliana and I arrived. My lawyer explained that Kayla and her attorney were waiting in the conference room and that only those involved should enter. I took Juliana's hand and led her, along with my attorney, into the room. Kayla looked up, visibly startled to see me walk in with another woman. I barely glanced in her direction. I guided Juliana to an empty chair and pulled it out for her, as I always did, ensuring she was comfortable before taking the seat beside her. My lawyer sat to my left, and I gently took Juliana's left hand in mine, placing our joined hands on the table in plain view. She slid her chair closer until our sides touched and rested her head softly on my shoulder. Only then did I turn my attention to Kayla. Truthfully, she looked exactly as I'd expected. I'd heard often enough that life hadn't been kind to her since I left, but I felt no sympathy. She made choices that led to this moment, choices that cost her everything. She hadn't spoken to our daughter in over a year. Our son barely tolerated her. My entire family cut ties, and from what I'd heard, even her own family was disillusioned, though they accepted her only because my father had forced her out of the house. "All right, Kayla," I said calmly. "Say what you need to say so we can finalize this. I have a life to live, and you're part of the past now." She looked at Juliana and asked softly, "Who is she?" "That's Juliana Morris," I replied without hesitation. "As soon as the divorce is finalized, I'm going to propose to her. One day, she'll be Juliana Williams." Juliana smiled and added, "And of course, I'll say yes. I want nothing more than to be his wife and the mother of his children." I gave a small smile, but kept my eyes on Kayla. "Once she says yes, we'll plan a simple ceremony. With any luck, she'll be pregnant by the time we're married." I knew my words cut deep. The pain in her eyes was unmistakable, and though I recognized it, I didn't feel sorry. She'd earned it. "You moved on fast," she said. "I wasn't the one who cheated, Kayla," I answered. "You were. I left behind proof. You never explained yourself. I walked out that night, and you didn't try to stop me." "I didn't think I needed to fight," she murmured. "You were my husband." "That's right. But in the end, you weren't worth fighting for," I said coldly. "You betrayed me. After 20 years together, you threw it all away. We talked often about fidelity and commitment. I told you, if you ever acted like my mother, I'd walk, and I meant it. You made my decision easy. Do you even regret it?" I asked, but before she could respond, I cut her off. "Don't answer. You don't regret what you did. You regret getting caught. You regret exposing the truth that our marriage was a lie, and you were no better than my mother." Her lawyer cleared his throat, perhaps trying to interject. I shot him a warning glare. "Don't," I warned. "She wanted this conversation. She'll hear my truth too." Kayla finally spoke again. "I made a mistake." "No, Kayla," I said sharply. "What you did was betrayal. It wasn't a slip, it was a chain of decisions. I don't care if he seduced you or if you went looking for it. The fact is you slept with another man, and in doing so, you gave up any right to call me your husband." "It was just sex," she said quietly. "And that right there," I replied, "is the excuse everyone uses to justify their betrayal. Just sex. For most people, sex and love are connected. And you were my wife, you were supposed to share that intimacy with me, not with some coworker. We discussed this long before we got married. Kayla, you just don't remember. I warned you clearly what would happen if you ever cheated on me. You also forgot that my mother was unfaithful, too. Once I finally pulled myself out of denial, I saw exactly what you were doing. I just had to gather enough proof. If you had said no that night, would you still have left?" You asked. "Yes, I would have, but the way I left would have been different. What you did that night was incredibly disrespectful. You earned everything that followed. You emptied our accounts. Consider it payment for 20 wasted years." I paused and shook my head. "Actually, no. That's not completely fair. You gave me 2 beautiful children. It wasn't all a waste. I had also confirmed they were biologically mine. That visibly upset her. "I never cheated on you back then," she said. "No, you didn't," I replied. "You only became unfaithful later. You sold our house," she said. "No, I transferred it to my father," I corrected. "It's still in his name. He's renting it out and has already told me he plans to sell it soon. I'll receive most of the proceeds so I can buy a new home near where I live now." "You didn't even give me a chance," she whispered. "Because you didn't deserve one, Kayla. Where do you live now?" "That's none of your business," I said firmly. "I don't want you knowing. You're no longer part of my life. Our children are grown. They can decide who they want to spend holidays and birthdays with." She went quiet, realizing there was nothing she could say to change my mind. "Just sign the papers and move on with your life," Juliana said calmly. "He hasn't seen or spoken to you in a year. He's accepted reality. We love each other deeply. We're going to get married, start a family, and grow old together. You chose to leave him, and I'm thankful I was there to help him pick up the pieces. I wrapped my arms around Juliana and whispered that everything would be okay, that I would never let her down. She held my heart, and I held hers. I didn't mean to, Kayla said through tears, looking directly into my eyes. I didn't flinch. I stayed composed. Tears didn't move me anymore. Marvin, I still love you. Good for you, I replied coldly. I don't care, Kayla. My tone made her flinch. Don't mistake my calm for compassion. I don't hate you, I just don't care anymore. You stopped being my concern the moment you let another man into our marriage. Silence fell over the room until her lawyer finally cleared his throat. This is clearly going nowhere. Just sign the papers and bring this to an end. He's clearly moved on and intends to remarry. There's no reason for the court to deny this. The marriage is over. The children are grown. There's no shared property left. Do the right thing, sign, and move on. He pulled the papers from his folder and placed them in front of her, sliding a pen across the table. Kayla met my eyes and began to cry openly. I knew her well enough to recognize the emotion was real. Still wiping her cheeks, she picked up the pen with a trembling hand, scanned the document briefly, then signed and dated it at the bottom. Do I need to be in court for the final decree? I asked my lawyer. No, Marvin, he replied. You're free to go. The divorce decree will arrive by mail. Good. Then we're done. Juliana stood and took my hand, and I led her out of the room. I'm sorry, Marvin, I heard Kayla say behind me. I'll always love you. I appreciated the apology, even if it didn't carry much weight anymore. Too little, too late. As for the final words, I believe she meant them. But it didn't matter. The woman I loved was beside me, holding my hand, and in just a few weeks, she would be my wife. Outside, we met my father, Natalie, Stan, and Charlene at the cafe. I gestured that I needed a drink, and we made our way to the nearest pub. After buying a round of beers, we sat together at a table. I shared what had happened during the meeting. Emotions ran high, and they became misty-eyed as I admitted that most of the conversation was me finally getting everything off my chest. How did she look? Charlene asked. She looks her age, I answered, if not older. Definitely an upgrade. Juliana whispered into my ear with a smile. Did she sign the papers? My father asked, already nodding as if he knew the answer. We raised our glasses and toasted, taking long sips from our beers. I went through the same hell with your mom, he said. I believe what Kayla told you. She tried telling me the same things. She wasn't blaming me, just making excuses. She said it was because I worked too much, I replied to Stanley. Classic excuse, he said. It was just sex, right? What is it with some unfaithful women using that line? Charlene asked aloud. I married my husband, and I would never consider stepping out. If I want something, I go to him and make it happen. She paused and blushed, realizing she'd just said that in front of both her father and grandfather. We exchanged amused glances and broke into laughter. Well said, girl, my father chuckled. That's something to live by. Your grandfather doesn't stand a chance, Natalie teased. But if he ever needs a little help, he knows what's out there. Natalie, Charlene exclaimed, embarrassed. He's my grandfather. He's not dead, and neither am I, my father shot back. I'm 65 and still fully capable. Natalie laughed, shaking her head. We met later in life, but we made a promise to treat each other right. We both came out of marriages destroyed by infidelity. I'm just glad it's nearly over, I admitted. I hate being part of another divorce, but like I said in that room, infidelity is a deal breaker. Fair play to those who can work through it. But maybe if the kids had been younger, I would have felt trapped. I looked over at my father and added, even so, it wasn't easy. But he stood by me the whole time. We stayed in Sydney for a few more days so I could talk with my family about their plans. Charlene and Tom were quick to agree to visit Adelaide. Stanley was still considering, but leaning toward joining us. My sister surprised me by coming to dinner alone. That's when I learned her marriage had also come to an end. You can stay with us while you figure things out, Juliana offered. Any family of his is family to me now. You're welcome with us. I'm selling the house here, and we're going to make a good profit, I explained. Housing prices in Adelaide are much more affordable, so we'll be buying a spacious home with plenty of room for the kids. Juliana smiled, took my hand, and placed it gently on her stomach. I'll be carrying our first child soon. How many do you want, Marvin? As many as you want, Julie. I love being a father. A month later, the divorce decree arrived. My marriage to Kayla, who chose not to keep my last name, was officially over. I never heard from her again. Rumor had it she left Sydney within 6 months of the divorce. Stanley, the only one still in touch with her, told me she had moved north to Queensland to start over. Eventually, I stopped asking, and he stopped updating me. I simply didn't care anymore. 2 days after the decree came through, I proposed to Juliana on the beach, surrounded by our families. She was so overwhelmed with emotion she could barely speak, but she nodded through happy tears as I slipped the ring onto her finger. 6 months later, we were married on that very same beach, just a few hundred meters from our new home. Juliana's baby bump was unmistakable as she walked toward me in her gown, glowing with happiness. Her father gave her hand to me, and we couldn't stop smiling as we turned to face the celebrant. I'm now 1 year away from retirement, and my life has never been better. Juliana and I have been married nearly 20 years, and our love is just as strong as it was the day we met. From our first date to all the moments that led up to our wedding day, it's been a journey full of meaning. 6 months after we settled in Adelaide, both my daughter and son relocated here too after a visit to Sydney. My daughter and Tom are still happily married and have given us 3 wonderful grandchildren. My son married an incredible man, and together they're raising 2 beautiful children. My father and Natalie joined us in Adelaide a year after the divorce. He spent nearly a decade with us before passing peacefully in his sleep. Natalie was devastated, and we insisted she move in with us immediately. She was hesitant at first until she saw how big the house was. We eventually built a granny flat for her so she could have her independence while staying close. My sister moved in with us shortly after her own marriage fell apart. Like me, she'd also experienced infidelity. Her ex didn't fight when she took the children. We helped her get back on her feet, and within months she married one of my close friends and co-workers. They've now been married for 15 happy years. My brother stayed in Sydney and remained the only one who kept in contact with our mother. At 60, I learned she had passed away. We hadn't spoken in nearly 4 decades. When I heard the news, I felt no sadness. Still, Juliana encouraged us to attend the funeral not for her, but for ourselves, as an act of grace. We all traveled to Sydney together. I was surprised to find that she had remarried and embraced her husband's children as her own. They were aware of our existence, but stunned to learn she had been estranged from 2 of her 3 biological children. We could have explained the estrangement, but a funeral wasn't the time or place. We simply said we were there to pay our final respects before heading back home. Within the year, my brother also moved into our Adelaide home. Juliana and I eventually had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. My older daughter and son were thrilled to have younger siblings and often volunteered to babysit. Though Juliana and I didn't go out often, our love remained deep and unwavering. We cherished each other's company, never went to bed angry, and our life together is just as full and joyful now as it was the night we first became intimate. Looking back on that period during the divorce, I know there were people who probably thought I should have tried to reconcile with my ex-wife. But what would have been the point? My silent departure left her with more pain than any confrontation could have. I remained quiet for a year before coming back to finalize the divorce. She knew exactly how I felt about fidelity and still chose to violate that bond. I don't fault those who choose to reconcile after infidelity. That's their path. If someone finds it in themselves to forgive, that's a personal strength. But I've never believed trust can fully be rebuilt after it's broken. Suspicion and resentment are bound to linger, and in many cases, divorce becomes inevitable. So I took another route, not one of vengeance or destruction, but one of quiet finality. I walked away and didn't look back. That decision led me to Juliana, my true soulmate. I still believe that running into her at the supermarket was fate. I'm not religious, but I'm sure some ancient cultures had gods of destiny who would have approved. Are you ready, Marvin? I turned to see my wife standing there, radiant in a red ball gown. You've still got the magic, I said with a smile. Any word from the kids? They're either on their way or just about to leave. And the little ones? They'll be fine for one night unless they burn down the house. Then we have time to enjoy ourselves. Yes, we do. I adore you, husband. And I love you more, my wife. Here's to years of happiness. I certainly hope so. I'll let the kids know they won't be staying long. They'll understand why. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.